Hon Paul Ayah, thank you so much for coming to talk to us. I identify you as one of our political leaders and intellectuals who know much of the history of this country and maybe has a vision and a direction to where it should be heading. The interest in doing this study about the impact of 20th May 1972 on Cameroon national integration, whatever you define as a working definition for that, what is national integration, and the impact it has on the agitations on Southern Cameroon for independence. And this is a qualitative study. I don't have prepared questions. Most of the other questions will come from.
Well, I would say I should thank you instead for considering me maybe worthy to say something. In 1972, I was in the upper 6th class when I just suddenly declared that it would be a referendum to abolish the Federation and impose what I call a military state and start a peaceful revolution. I have had a very close relationship with the British soldier, Lieutenant Colonel Valentine, L.T. Valentine, Leslie Thomas Valentine. And this man, at the time, was Deputy Director of Community Development. And he used a very difficult word. Said what the leader was about doing was annexation of West Cameroon. Well, I got the word, I looked it up in the dictionary, but it didn't mean very much to me then. As a child, I also saw that it was going to dismantle the institutions of West Cameroon, and I felt very bad against it. Because I had been the third batch to the Federal Bilingual Grammar School, which he just set up. In fact, the only Federal Bilingual Grammar School at the time. And he just set this up to experiment what they call integration nationale. In the dormitory, every Anglophone bed was followed by Francophone, then Anglophone. So that in the end, no Anglophone was flanked by Anglophones and no Francophone by Francophones. And we thought that we were being used as tools of experiment. So it had an impact on me, but I didn't quite get the general import of what Colonel Valentine meant by annexation. I came later to understand, because that 72 had my A-levels and registered in the Faculty of Laws and Economics, as it was then called, in the Federal University in Yaoundé. So in my study of law, I came across the Constitution, and I noticed that Section 47 had stated in clear terms that no bill tending to impair the federal character of the state will be admissible in Parliament. He now cleverly circumvented Parliament and did it by way of the flambeau. But whatever he did was contrary to the spirit of the Constitution. And the animosity we had in the Bilingual Grammar School, in spite of all the facilities we had built in some of us some measure of hatred. So bringing us to the military state simply meant making things worse for us. And the impact on me as an individual has been more or less heightening the spirit of nationalism, feeling that we departed from what we had agreed. Because
nationalism towards our country.
Yes, because whatever the case, it is we who decided voluntarily to join the Republic of Cameroon. And for them to vote for the abolition of what we had agreed upon was contrary to the spirit of the Anglophone. And from that time, things have never been the same again, because that very year, as we entered the university, President Ayah adopted a policy of région scolarisée and région sous-scolarisée. That meant where there was high literacy rate and where there was low literacy rate. And everybody who came from the north The three regions of the North at that time were just one, called the North. Whoever came from there, whether he was 45 years or even older, had full scholarship. But the policy of Region Scolarisé and Region Sous-Scolarisé was that if you came from Region Scolarisé, where there was high literacy rate, and you were above 18, you were not entitled to scholarship. Whereas, to the contrary, you were entitled whatever the age. And Mani was one of the first two divisions with the highest literacy rate. And I got myself caught in the web of something which was not on my doing. Because the school period at the level of primary schools in West Cameroon was 2 years in the infants classes, 6 years in the standard classes, 8 years. Then you did secondary school for 5 years. That already brought you to 13. 2 years in the high school brought it to 52. Which means if you didn't go to school at the age of 3, which was of course preposterous, you did not go to school at the age of 3, it meant that if you didn't go to school at the age of 3, you were not entitled to scholarship to study in the university. And as I said, from that time, things have only worsened and worsened and worsened. As a civil servant, I came to realize from newspapers, from what was happening even before my own eyes, that if you were Anglophone, your position at the best was an assistant. And I mean, I cannot bring my mind to this because however intelligent you are, however senior you are to somebody speaking French, that person is necessarily your boss. And till today, if you look at our setup, the President of the Republic is French speaking. The President of the Senate is French speaking. The President of the National Assembly is French speaking. The President of the Economic and Social Council is French speaking. If we consider in the context of what I call sovereignty, the Minister of Foreign Affairs is French speaking. The Minister of Armed Forces is French speaking. An Anglophone comes in at the level of the Prime Minister, where in fact is not powerful in the sense that the real power is in the hands of the Secretary General, who is French speaking. And we do not understand how we can talk about integration, where people will continue to refer to you as Nigerian, as Biafra, and all that, because I was in the National Assembly present and in session when the Francophone addressed a member of Parliament, Honorable Paulinus Chua, Nigeria. And with the new border demarcation, in fact, that that parliamentarian's village is now in Nigeria. And he himself had studied in Nigeria. So all those things are only building up to heighten the spirit of nationalism in Anglophone. If they had infringed the law in 72, we still talked about the United Republic of Cameroon. If it had stopped at that, and we still had a certain measure of autonomy, one day, maybe think otherwise. But as it happened in 82, Biya took over from him. In 82, it took just 2 years for Biya to abolish once again the United Republic and go back to adopt the name of the Republic of Cameroon, which corresponds to the Cameroon that was under French, the United Nations trusteeship to France.
Prior to unification.
That again was a step much more than just annexation. Then we moved from there to 1990. That's 6 years after going back to the Republic of Cameroon, where the 30th anniversary of the independence of the Republic of Cameroon was celebrated in Cameroon. And this was done to the exclusion of Anglophonians, because the state itself came out with a flag, I mean rather a postage stamp, and drew the map of Cameroon on that postage stamp, which does not include the part of West Cameroon as it was at the time of federating. So, I mean, from that time on, you see that the Anglophone has completely lost its identity. And because of that, even as much as some people are singing praises to national unity, to integration, the typical Anglophone behind the scenes doesn't feel Cameroon. And I don't think I am any different. Maybe I feel more un-Cameroonian. I feel more as a southern Cameroonian than Cameroonian.
There must have been, you stated very clearly Article 47 of the Federal Constitution, and there must have been events leading to Ahidjo even having the audacity to do what happened in 1972. Take us through events from October 1961 to 1972. What really gave the cracks for Ahidjo to be able to have the power or the audacity to carry out such a momentous event?
I will do that without palliating the fact that whatever Ahidjo did was unconstitutional. In 1961, what they call the Federal Constitution provided that in the event the President of the Republic was French-speaking, the vice was necessarily English-speaking and vice versa. So Ahidjo became the president through a kind of, I think there was no election. Ahidjo simply moved from being president of the Republic of Cameroon to the president of the Federal Republic of Cameroon. Foncha being the prime minister of West Cameroon and became the vice president. After that, there was election. On the list, Ahidjo was the presidential candidate, Foncha was the vice presidential candidate. This went on until 1961. 1968, sorry. Went on until 1968, when Ahidjo thought that he had sufficiently intimidated the Anglophones to go on to violate the Constitution. Strangely to him, Foncha refused to accede to the abolition of the Federation. As for Augustin Lomjua, he was virtually imperial. Nobody would even have the audacity to suggest a thing like that to him. So Augustine distanced himself from it. But as it is the situation with Anglophones even today, Muna decided to cooperate with Ahidjo on the ground that Ahidjo made him vice president and prime minister at the same time. West Cameroon. So in 1968, Ahidjo violated the Constitution by dismissing elected persons that 1968 that Foncha was, an elected person that Jua was, and appointed somebody to sit on the chairs of elected positions of elected positions who voted for him. So this Foncha, Mona now became the vice president and prime minister of West Cameroon, residence in Goa. The way was now open for Ahidjo to get rid of the Federation. By 1972, I just saw that nobody could dare challenge his authority. So he declared what he called peaceful revolution, which led to the referendum of 20 May 1972, the abolition of the Federation and the adoption of the unity state in the name of the United Republic of Cameroon.
But we came in the Cameroon government, and what happened to the democratic institutions of Southern Cameroon?
Yes, the first thing is that even today, whereas the rest of the world, maybe essentially English world, says that the fear of the law is the beginning of wisdom. The Francophone says the fear of the gendarme is the beginning of wisdom. La peur du gendarme est le commencement de la sagesse. So those are two different mentalities. Whereas there was terrorism in East Cameroon, there was a lot of French repression, killing of Cameroonians by the French army. In southern Cameroon, it was the opposite. So a good many leaders who were fighting for the independence of the Republic of Cameroon that was under French administration took refuge in West Cameroon.
Okay.
And that's why, especially in what is known today as the Southwest region, we find a lot of non-natives in prominent positions. So the UPC took us as a sanctuary,
yes,
and fought for the unification of Cameroon. What they call reunification, I don't know if it is reunification because Cameroon, at that time, the German Cameroon that was put under the French and the British, included a good part of Equatorial Guinea, Gabon, Central African Republic, and Congo, and even Chad.
yes.
So they were now looking at West Cameroon as a sanctuary, and that if this part of the territory, let me call it, under British administration was made to join that the one under the French, it would try to have a palliating effect on the atrocities that were going on in the French, in the Cameroon under the French. And that's, I think, what motivated them. But as to the democratic institutions, the moment Ahidjo came out with what they call a Constitution of 2nd May 1972, the institutions of West Cameroon ceased to exist. And even the structures that were not political structures, marketing board, Cameroon Bank, and all that, eventually ceased to exist because the atmosphere created by the new structure of the state was not favorable for them to thrive. Today, many years, after 1972, you find that the state is still interfering a lot in the private sector. Only yesterday, I watched a program on a private TV channel where they were talking particularly about the Minister of Culture. But she's interfering with the author's rights to a point where, whereas she doesn't respect even the Supreme Court of this state, which has taken decisions declaring illegal the structure she set up called SOCAN. She turns around and says somebody of double nationality should not be the board chair of SOCAN. So you find that the state interferes even today in the private sector to a point where the presence of the state is overbearing. And it's the same thing that happened to the structures that were existing in West Cameroon at the time. They abolished them one by one, even to a point where monuments were destroyed. Because I remember I was present when they dismantled the West Cameroon House of Assembly. Dismantling it, all the microphones that were hanging, because in the West Cameroon system, you never had any place called rostrum where you had to go and address the house. There was a microphone in front of every parliamentarian. All that was destroyed, the archives were destroyed, the gallery, and dumped in the gutter for everything to be swept into the sea. In the pretext that we were transforming the structure into Procurator's General's office. All of that today I could not eat. I hadn't the courage to eat. See? So that even the vestiges that remain of West Cameroon are being destroyed one by one till today. Those that they are unable to destroy, maybe like the German power, which the SDO is using as residents in Manfred, virtually abandoned, the hanging bridges. So those democratic institutions that existed in West Cameroon were deliberately destroyed.
There seemed to be no...
as you rightly said, when Ahidjo came over to West Cameroon, for the first time, probably he saw a policewoman led Miss Bichi display with the lands. Ahidjo, first of all, got very, very embarrassed that a woman could do that, and then he feared for his life. What if she was not faithful enough, and she did that, all that, and pierced him? He would stab him to death. When he came again, and Egbe, Commissioner Egbe, well, we call them commissioners, the superintendent of police, Egbe did the same thing. Ahidjo quickly went over to Yaoundé and abolished the mobile group. Southern Cameroons did not have an army. They had the mobile police, mobile So Ahilo began by abolishing this. Then he went to assume, extraordinary powers in the name of fighting terrorism, which led to his coming out with an ordinance on subversion, 1962 ordinance on subversion. That ordinance helped him to intimidate or get rid of anybody who put up resistance. So that as much as some Southern Cameroonians and eventually West Cameroonians were democratic, they feared for their lives. Okay. And so they submitted cowardly, I would say cowardly. Today in Cameroon, for instance, this is not a matter of boasting. Today in Cameroon, for instance, the only politician who has come out openly to support the Southern Cameroon's cause is Ayah. I've done that in writing, I've done that in interviews, just as I'm doing here now. The rest...
And let me add that the only politician who was on the party of the president opposed a constitutional amendment that was not favorable is still Ayah, right?
Thank you for that. And so, to answer your question, there are two ways. The one of submission to intimidation. People who are not courageous enough to stand their ground. And the one of people fighting for their personal interest. In fact, in Cameroon today and in the mentality of Francophone, the state is no man's land. You take your own. In fact, I cannot remember how many times high-ranking personalities in Cameroon have come to me and told me, why are you suffering? Why are you jeopardizing the life of your family or children? Take your own and keep quiet. So they don't have that notion of general interest. For instance, we used to have public telephone booths. Today, put one. Now, as we're talking, and 2 hours later, you can find it. Put flush pans in the public toilet. At 6 o'clock, by 8 p.m., you won't find anything. So there is this sense of, let me take my own. It doesn't matter how many people die because I'm deprived of water, medical facilities, and electricity, and so on. And the Afrophones have fallen into this blindly, and they are even doing more than blindly.
Yes.
That is the trouble in Cameroon today. So the spirit of democracy, just go behind the scenes and you hear what the very Anglophones who are singing praises, sending what they call in Cameroon emotions of support. I know that in English emotion is a thing that has not yet carried. When it carries, it becomes a word. They just translate from French "monsieur" and say emotion of support. The very people who say those emotions of support, when you meet them privately, they are bitterer than you are. You are talking publicly. So we have those things, as I've said, lack of courage and serving the personal interest.
So, well, was there still this extent of fear by our We are even insinuation that some of them campaigned for 1972 to occur?
Many of them. If you look at the global history at the time, West Cameroon, as I've said, had no army. He just sent his army here. By the way, Chandans here who were so black in color that even their palms were black. And they tattooed their faces, meaning from head to the neck. So they were very frightful, and the equipment of them were very huge. You cannot fight an army when you don't have an army, because they are professional. The people that West Cameroon that relied on, the country West Cameroon that relied on, fallen back on, or leaned on, was Nigeria. Okay. But there had been this animosity of the Igbos mistreating Cameroonians before reunification, the plebiscite. And because of that, the Cameroonians maybe prefer to get rid of that than otherwise. Above all, don't forget that Nigeria had the civil war going on. Yes. So, Southern Cameroons, let me call it Cameroonians, found themselves empty. Civil war in Nigeria, then the Republic of Cameroon. In the Middle East, they were powerless. So that as much as maybe would have expected them to be courageous, I would imagine that in their thinking, there was no way out.
Okay. So now we are here, national integration seems to be a fast.
You see things that the negative that built up over the years. And you know that if you are, somebody's pushing you backwards, and you get to a point where your back is against the wall, you cannot go any further. So, we had this situation where we go volunteer to join, in quotes, our brothers in the East are paying a heavy price, because if somebody comes out openly and tells you don't belong here, because I remember that when SDF was launched, they considered it an Anglophone party, and SDF made the blunder of adopting a flag that was like the Nigerian flag, green and white. So they considered that as an Anglophone party, and told us to go back home, that we don't belong here, we're not Cameroonians. And they continue to say so, they call us Biafra up to now. We expected that a strong statement would come from the President of the Republic denouncing this, but he has not done it. So if eventually a statement was published by WikiLeaks with the effect that Bamileke can not be the President of Cameroon, much less an Anglophone. If you are in a country and you cannot accede to the highest office, then you are not a full citizen, you don't have full rights. So over the years, this has built up, and when I got to a point where they tell you, no, you cannot, don't ever go. Then if you are not a full citizen, and you are told to go to where you belong, normally you go to, you have to think and maybe make a U-turn. And there is no country, there's nobody in the world today who is stateless. A state is made up of the people and the territory. The subsidiary organ of the United Nations, the African Commission on Human and People's Rights, has recognized Southern Cameroonians as a people. And you know that there is a territory known as Southern Cameroonians. And therefore, joining those together has heightened the expectation of the Southern Cameroonians to statehood, aspiration to sovereignty. So that this unfortunate statement, which has come to crown the previous statements that made us look and feel that we don't belong, has now catapulted our aspiration, our determination. If we don't belong, then we belong somewhere. And if an organ of the UN says we are the people, then of course we are entitled to the country and the territory is there.
So where do you see that heading?
Well, that is heading for now. I have seen examples in Africa where people decided to get rid of dictators, in quotes, they said they were dictators, and 20 years after, there's no central government. I can cite the example of Ethiopia, Somalia, Democratic Republic of Congo. So for now, we are approaching international personalities and foreign countries. We say, look, an organ of the United Nations called for dialogue between the Republic of Cameroon and Southern Cameroon. It was ignored. The Secretary General of the United Nations came and called for dialogue on the Cameroonian territory between the Republic of Cameroon and Southern Cameroon. It has been ignored. Some personality of the UN came here and produced two maps. This is the Republic of Cameroon as we know. This is the territory known as Southern Cameroon. So where are we? It has been ignored. And you see, we're just going on and on and on. But all the same, we are saying, let us not be in a rush. Let us organize the people first. Once we organize the people, because for now, we are not properly organized. I remember radio, we are conducting a voice pack. Children from primary school right to graduate to the university where we asked, what is the significance of 11th February? And almost consistently, they kept saying 11th February is the day the governor goes to Independence Square and there's march past. So they know nothing about the fact that it was the day that the people of Southern Cameroon decided to vote for their independence. Even though in the end, there was no independence by joining, but at least the moment the British government abandoned us, we became independent. So we should do enough sensitization. Let us not rush things and make things impossible for ourselves or cause unnecessary human failures. I am not saying that there will not come a time where if things cannot work, there will be no violence. I'm not saying so. I keep telling people
you're not ruling out violence.
I never can. I mean, God himself
is not your main approach.
Not man. God himself used violence against him. Yes. So violence is divine. On the last day, they'll come and push people into the lake of fire. It's violence. United Nations says, if all else fails, violence is the answer. So we cannot say we are more than God and that we can rule out violence. What we are saying is that for now, let us still give Yaoundé a chance. If they are reasonable, they should come, we talk. Either we agree to get into a two-state federation with everything enshrined in the Constitution in detail. But the problem Cameroon today is that when they enact a law, they say, oh, implementation, or the head of state will take it. So we put